In this tutorial, we're going to be creating a function that will count the number of words that are in a string. And as you probably know, the number of words in a string is usually calculated based on the number of spaces that we have. So the sentence "Hello world" has one space and two words. And most sentences will always have one more word than they have spaces, unless, of course, well, pretty much that's always the case. Even an interjection such as "stop" has zero spaces and therefore one word. And since words are always separated by spaces, except in the odd cases of hyphens, we can usually assume that the number of words in a string is equal to the number of spaces in the string plus 1. So we're going to create a function that accepts a string, and every time it finds a space in the string, it's going to add 1 to a counter. And at the end of the string, when we get to the end of the string, we're going to return that counter. So let's call our function wordCount, and it returns an integer, of course. Int wordCount, and char asterisk, and we don't have to call this s, but I always call it s, so just call it s and you'll be good. Now we're going to create a for loop that is going to loop through every character in our string, and it's going to keep going until it gets to the end of the string. Every time it gets to a space, it's going to add 1 to our counter. So first, let's create our counter, and we'll set it at 0, and then we need to create the variable for our loop, which we'll call I. And in case I haven't said already, it's normal to call this I. When you're using a loop, such as a while loop or a for loop, you usually call the counter variable I. And I know I've confused you because I called I a counter variable and I've named this variable counter, but that's okay. You can be confused and we'll all live with it. Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm not really that mean of a guy. I is a counter variable, int is not a counter variable, but it's called counter. I'm sorry about that. So for I is equal to 0, we're going to do, well, si, while this I position character in s is not equal to the null terminated character, which is 0. I'm going to increment I by 1. In the for loop, we're going to write code that says this: if this character is equal to a space, I'm going to increment the counter variable by 1. And remember I said that even if there's no spaces in a word, that most likely we need to return 1. So I actually made a mistake, and it would probably be a better idea to start the counter variable at 1 instead of at 0. And now all we have to do is return counter. So we're going to create a sentence, and I'm going to call it s because I always call these s's because I'm a boring guy. And hello, my name is Sheldon. So that's our string, and now I'm going to print out word count on that string, and we should get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And word count of the string s, and we'll see what we get. Hope we get 5, and we do get 5. So this word count function will work for any string as long as words are separated by spaces, and as you know, in most sentences in the English language, words are separated by spaces. You could create a slightly more complicated function that will also return true if the word is separated by 2 hyphens, which is what we usually call a dash. But this is the simple version, and it works quite well. Well, I hope you've learned something in this tutorial, and even if you haven't, I hope to see you again in the next tutorial.